I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting of Tuesday, February 15th, 2011 to order. And our order of business is going to be changed somewhat. We're moving the police department and the drug fund, that is 7 and 8, I guess up right behind approval of the minutes. Is that okay?
Or do you want to? Okay.
That's fine.
I think we can get approval of the minutes, and these would be as revised that you've recently gotten. Is there a motion?
Move for approval of revised minutes.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, now we're ready then to look at item 7, which is the budget presentation for the police department.
And I'll just say a couple comments and let the department take it away. This is our first briefing from the departments, and as we've done the last couple years, we give the departments a chance to come and talk to you directly about what their budget requests are, what they see as budget needs for the upcoming year and beyond, and this is designed to continue that. We've asked departments to specifically focus on budget issues. The last couple years we've done some broader issues in the department, and we'll focus a little more on budget because we've got some of that context, as well as you'll notice you're getting the departmental profiles that have been built into the budget in past years. You're going to get those along with the packets that have the budget numbers and the line item details as well. So that gives you some context without us probably having to go into that as much in the presentation side. So we'll hit that with you. It's really the department's opportunity to tell you what they see as budget issues overall. What you get tonight will be processed as part of what we put together from a staff recommendation and a city administrator's recommended budget. What you get tonight is not necessarily what you'll see the first week of May when you get a recommended budget from staff. So I just offer that to you as this is what's being put on the table by departments at this relatively early stage of the budget process. And this is an opportunity for you to hear where they are and what they see as issues going forward.
I got a question. Did the city administrator give any instructions to the departments about whether to fund a pay increase? Is that reflected in any of these?
That would not be reflected
budgets?
in any of these. That's a more global decision that we make later in the process as we're farther along and closer in terms of what we see in terms of revenue estimates, where we see expenditures across the board coming in and what we feel we're able to do from there. So that would not be reflected. Other cost escalators should be factored in terms of utilities and other factors, and we've tried to give some guidance on that from a budget manual that we may show you a little bit of too, that helps give some guidance on some of those broader issues. But the general across the board, or what we might do by way of merit or general cost of living increases, is a decision that's made further into the process and not reflected at this point.
That makes me think, first of all, the 2% that people have gotten this last, or will get the last 6 months, has been continued. That was a permanent 2%. It was not just a one-time.
Yeah,
payment.
The current rate of pay is projected in what you see in the numbers you're getting today. So the 2% that happened effectively the first of the calendar year is carried over in the base numbers that we're working off of right now.
And that was citywide, right?
Yes. That reminds me, though, of something that I sent and was saying, in most cases on the budget, the people who are making decisions get the projected revenues, too. And so that kind of gives gives us an idea of where things stand. I understand that revenues are of course, difficult to predict, but I've noticed other government entities in the area have had those projected revenues along with their projected expenses, and I would like to consider that.
We should probably have that for you in the next couple of weeks. We just received the month of December sales tax end of last week. That marks a 6-month period, as well as getting the largest single month. I think that's important to have that base data before you go further with larger projections. I would expect in the next 2 weeks we have at least a preliminary, broader revenue forecast, our general guidance has been it's going to be about a flat budget from where you are today. You may not have the reductions that we've experienced over the last 2 years, which in total is about a 15% reduction over the last
Yes.
2 years. You probably won't have reductions of that magnitude, but you're not going to have
Increase.
dramatic increases or
That's good.
much increase, if at all, in these numbers as a general planning horizon. That's what we've provided as general direction to departments at this point.
Are
So
we
we'll let
ready to start
Police
with?
go?
Police, yes.
If I may make this comment, my name is listed to present this. However, Interim Chief Dave Rahinsky graciously stepped up and agreed to make this presentation tonight, and I graciously accepted that. Since I won't be back for another meeting, I think it was appropriate. And I do want to express my great appreciation to him for his leadership and to the two deputy chiefs for their leadership and involvement in this.
Thanks, Chief. Chief obviously has a very liberal view of the word gracious, but I appreciate the opportunity. At the direction of the city administrator, we're going to give you a very succinct view this early in the process and allow room for discussion and any questions that you may have. What you see is just a brief snapshot, but it's indicative of the direction of the department. Offenses have been consistently up. The clearance rate is now above 50%. The national average is consistently around 25%. We included Group A crimes because the increase in Group A crimes is much smaller than the overall increase. Group A crimes are serious crimes. The majority of our crime increase was driven by retail theft, which is really a crime that you generally catch when you have an offender in custody. Arrest, for the first time in our history, we broke the 2,000 arrests in a year plateau, and we also, the most accidents ever recorded within the city, 2,227. These are the current unfunded vacant positions that we are requesting remain unfunded for this coming fiscal year. 13 patrol officers, 2 detectives, 3 communications positions, and 1 records clerk. We are requesting...
Can you go back to that one more time? Sorry. Just trying to look at that a little bit longer.
Those are the current unfunded vacant positions.
Okay.
We're not requesting any new positions be funded. We are requesting a reclassification of 2 positions, 1 administrative secretary to administrative assistant, which would put her on par with other people within the department who do the same job. And we're requesting a reclassification of a sergeant's position to a lieutenant's position. That's an existing sergeant's position. Total personnel budget from 10.5 to just over 11 million. We think it's significant. In our overall expenditures, 74% of our budget goes to personnel cost. It really leaves us very little percentage-wise compared to what we spend on benefits and salary. This is the number that you'll see reflected in the 2% pay increase that we were given. A number that we do have the ability to manage much more closely and affect is overtime. I think this is a good sign that we've taken a real leadership position on the overtime expenditures within the department. 3 years ago, it was closer to $750,000. We've got it now at 412 is the estimated actual for this year.
Do you attribute that to the change in the schedule?
Shift.
That was part of it, yes. It's a variety of things. That was one of the drivers. The other driver was we took a much more aggressive role in trying to make sure that we managed it properly. That in those types of calls where it would spill over from one shift to another, that we were really aggressively handing those off to incoming personnel as opposed to the personnel that would be getting off. We've got 20 operating categories within the budget. We're asking for less money in 13. We're asking for the same level of funding in 3, and we're asking for an increase in 4. That's the overall operations numbers from 3.1 to 3.4. These are the increases here. Utilities. is going up to $180,000 is the request. Fuel is going up to just over $300,000 for the request. Machinery and equipment, rentals, and debt service also increased. Capital increases from 406 to 48.5, 48.5. That's for the purchase of vehicles. We're currently on a 5-year rotation, which allows us to, every 5 years, the marked units are rotated out. The oldest marked unit on the road will be approaching its 6th year. We currently have 7 vehicles that will be approaching the 10-year mark as far as age of the vehicles. Those are all unmarked cars. There are currently 5 assigned to the Administrative Division and 2 assigned to the CID. We're looking to replace those with the 7 Ford Escapes.
Are those all SUVs, kind of thing that we have now currently?
They're actually smaller. The Escape is the smallest SUV that we could find on the state contract that was 4-wheel drive. We figured after a winter like we've had, we'd like to have more 4-wheel drive vehicles at our disposal. In comparison, this current fiscal year, we're funded at 14.1. The overall numbers for next year at this juncture are 14.9. Our drivers, obviously, we want to be responsible fiscal managers of the budgeted city funds. We want to proactively seek grant funding opportunities to offset the expenditures of taxpayer dollars and continue along the city's path to sustainability. And I think we'd like to take questions in this budget before we move on to the drug fund, if you have any.
I noticed, as you say, for the most part, you've had some things that moved down as well as some things that moved up. Still like 6% increase total, but let's see, I had something I said up and down on there. I don't think in yours I had specifically had anything marked except perhaps the capital. The capital, and as you say, that's mainly for the vehicles here, because we had a couple of years where we really
we did not buy. That's correct. We had several years where we did not purchase marked cars at all. We're on a little bit of a catch-up phase now.
One of the things we'll continue to look at is the purchase versus the lease arrangement. You remember the group of cars we purchased last year, we did through, it's really a lease purchase arrangement. And we will look at that same opportunity again this year when we're looking at the vehicles on the replacement cycle and make the determination about what we think is the best method in acquiring those vehicles, and we'll bring that forward to you as well, like we did last year, in terms of which option we think is best, and bring that to you for approval.
What about the fuel hedging that we've got? How's that going to affect our gas for this next budget?
Well, we continue to manage it. Russ can speak more of the specifics. We purchase about 60% on the hedge, and the rest we buy at market. So
we've already locked in our prices for the year beginning July 1st at, if I remember right, it's $2.10 for gasoline and $2.30 for diesel, which is exceptional.
Yeah,
and very.
It looks good right now, doesn't
It's always better to be lucky than good. That does not include some delivery costs, so we actually pay a landed cost that's a little bit more than that. But I would point out, when the prices go up like they have, although we're hedged on 60-odd%, we're still paying on 30-odd%. We're having to eat the cost. So we really don't know where that's going to be right now because of the turbulence that we've seen in North Africa and the Middle East. So it's anyone's guess where that's going to be. But we've tried to price in, Mike, at what price? Didn't we come in around, I've forgotten the price that we used in the manual for the gasoline.
It was like $2.80.
Yeah, it's above where we think we will be overall. But we could be paying $4 for the portion that we're not hedged on. So it's our very best guess at the moment, and it certainly looks at what the current prices are.
So is there any opportunity to, do we always have to keep that 40% outside the hedge?
We don't, but strategically we've not wanted to
That's why it's a hedge.
Yeah, I know.
Right now, it's a great thing, but it can fluctuate other directions too. So it kind of Russ's guidance, and as we've looked at this, has been to not overdo that, but to try to strike a good balance of how much you hedge versus how much you leave to the market.
Is there an opportunity to change that again?
We can, we're beginning to look at the
year out.
fiscal 13
Yeah.
budget now and what we're going to do, and the preliminary conversations that we're having with Metro Transit and Metro Schools is, we may even back off a little bit because the futures price has gone so high now that it may be overstating. Remember, if we had hedged 90%, we'd look really good right now, but if the price had dropped, the taxpayers would probably not be too pleased with what we're doing. By taking the position that we want to hedge about 62% overall, what that does is it protects us because in some months we have spikes. So we may be hedged 75 or 80% in a month where we have low utilization. And we do have some control over how much we use, too. I mean, we always have the option of driving less or parking a car or two somewhere. And we don't have the same control that you have over your personal vehicle because we're responding to emergencies. But we're probably in a better position to manage that when prices get extremely high by governing our utilization instead of additional hedging at this point. But we could raise those levels if you so choose. When we first started this program, obviously we all had a little trepidation about it. So
A good deal.
we decided to take baby steps.
And the other concern is right now the futures prices are so high that you would not get nearly this good a deal.
That's correct.
So
Well, we
So
know
we're-
gas prices are not going to go down.
I'd like to ask Chief Moore and Assistant Chief Rahinsky a question and let both of you answer it. But, we are proud of our police department and all the great work. And Chief Moore, we thank you for that. But I'd like to hear from you what your perspective is on what the biggest challenges are for our department going forward. And then I'd like to hear kind of a similar, it may be the exact same response, you can just say ditto, but kind of what you think the biggest challenges that we need to have in the back of our mind going forward.
I think, I don't ever like the terminology maintain because that indicates a status quo, but I'm going to use it here, and the reason is we just were involved in a seminar today that the content is rather scary because it indicates the potential for a lot of danger, and right now what we're seeing experienced across the United States is more intentional, a greater uptick in intentional killing of police personnel. And one of those things has to do with domestic terrorism. So in using the maintain, that's where I'm going to use that. That's one of the things, first of all, is officer safety. If we can't maintain our level of training and our level of receiving and evaluating intelligence and then translate that to action in the streets, then it could mean some very extreme danger for us. In terms of criminal activity, we're going to see, I think, more and more high-tech crime. We're going to see more identity theft, more white-collar crime, and we have been doing a really good job in being able to address those particular issues, and in being able to prosecute those. The federal prosecutors are usually where that type of crime is taken, and we enjoy an extremely good relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office in being able to successfully prosecute those. We're going to continue to see a need to stay in front of the internet crimes against children, violence toward domestic violence. I don't see that decreasing at all. The drug trafficking, what's taking place more across the state of Tennessee is trafficking in meth, and we're seeing more of that in Williamson County now. I've had the privilege of serving on the statewide meth task force for the last 5 or 6 years, and on the executive board. When we first formed that task force, you could generally point to meth as being concentrated in some particular parts of the eastern part of the United States and some parts of or eastern part of the state and the western part of the state. But more and more we're seeing it in the middle part of the state now. Part of that has to do with the transportation routes. Part of it has to do with where that meth is coming from, and more it's coming from Mexico. So there's going to need to be much attention paid to that, and unfortunately, that's where that word "maintain" has to come in. I mean, just to maintain where we are, to keep it as low as possible, because we're affected by the laws in states that surround us, and by that I mean the ability to move the precursors with which methamphetamine is produced, and consequently there's going to have to be some legislation that is not necessarily comfortable to across the counter users of some of the precursors that is used in the production of methamphetamine. Essentially, that's where I see the problems. The good news of that is I don't know when I've ever seen better networking between us and the federal and state agencies, and between other agencies, and less selfishness, less need to be recognized by everybody that's involved, and that's a very positive thing, because it and that I would encourage is probably the greatest thing that can be done to combat crime and to ensure the margin of safety that our citizens deserve, and that is to avoid grandstanding, avoid recognition of jurisdictional boundaries, and recognize that we're in this together.
Great response.
Oh, I've got a question to piggyback on that one.
If I could just interject
Yeah.
just for a moment, and it's a tough response to follow, but
And when you do,
we just
can you address that as well? That's what I want to ask you. If you would address that as well and talk about, Jackie just said something about networking, and can you address also how the technology has changed to allow us to do that?
Certainly. I wanted to just point out that under Chief Moore's leadership, he's positioned us well for the future. That being said, my concern is I look to the north of us and I look to the south of us, and I think the concern is that some of the urban crime, the potential for it to encroach into Franklin, exists and grows. As the community gets bigger, as we bring in more people from outside into Williamson County, I think that's a challenge we'll face. I do think that our aggressive law enforcement stance, coupled with the strong partnership we have with the community, puts us in a really good spot to face those challenges. We're constantly seeking best practices, new technology, new training opportunities, and I really think that all too often it's almost taken for granted that the community is as safe as it is. That hasn't happened in a vacuum. And I know how hard the men and women of the department work to keep it that way, and I'm confident that in the future we'll continue to sustain that level of success. More directly to your question, as the chief alluded to today, we had a conference that brought 120 law enforcement professionals in from 30 different jurisdictions. We were the host agency. We had that at the Marriott. We don't wait for other agencies to invite us into their shop to hear what the latest threats are or to be aggressive in fighting crime. We take the lead, and that's not going to change. We're positioned ideally in Middle Tennessee. We're a great venue. People love to travel here. When we bring in outside agencies, or outside speakers rather, to come to our agency, we quickly fill up conference centers, and that's something that we're going to continue. It's cost efficient. We get training without having to send our people out. It really makes us a destination for other law enforcement agencies. And I don't mind bragging. Chief Moore has really made us the envy of not just Middle Tennessee, but the state as far as the support that we have amongst the community and the elected and appointed officials.
Kind of where I said, echo a little bit what they've said. We need to have the sophistication and flexibility to respond to different crime, more urban type of things than we may have had in the past, but we still have to maintain that small town responsiveness. I think that's what our citizens expect. I think that's the level of service we strive to continue to provide, that responsiveness that people want. So you have to be sophisticated and flexible and adaptive to what the changing needs are, but you still have to come back to that fundamental human touch and responsiveness. And I think that's where we need to be.
Yes.
So one more thing about that. Can you just touch on a little bit more? What have we done in the last couple of years, budget-wise, that has allowed us to address these issues from a technology standpoint? How are we better today than we were 2-3 years ago, technology-wise?
I think we're spending our money smarter. We continue to spend it smarter. We've entered into partnership with the FBI. They support our ICAC. We have obtained grants, the most recent one being almost $50,000 for training.
Good.
We're aggressively seeking ways to defer some of the costs for the services that we provide to the residents at the federal and the state level. We've got officers, detectives, and supervisors who are driving vehicles that don't cost the city anything. Our ICAC people are driving FBI cars. The FBI pays for the fuel, they pay for the vehicles. There are other opportunities like that out there. We've got a detective detached to the Violent Crimes Task Force. He brings the weight of the federal forces to Franklin when we need that support. He also drives a federal vehicle. The networking really pays dividends. It gives us more tools at our arsenal. At the same time, it defers a lot of the cost.
Okay. Good. Thanks.
The drug fund is really straightforward. There's not a whole lot that it leaves in the way of questions. Current funding is $341,000. Last year we had budgeted $186,000. Last year was $178,000. This year we're requesting $186,000. Several categories are strictly under the drug fund, that being CID vice, evidence, and informants. We've also moved some operating categories under the drug fund in an effort to maintain the regular operating budget at a similar rate to last year, or at least as close as we could get. We moved accreditation, which was $25,000 for the CALEA process every year.
Yeah.
That has been moved under the drug fund. We moved some outside training under the drug fund. We also put $47,000 that we've identified that we hope to also use for training. That is a legitimate drug fund expenditure that we can take That's a fund that replenishes itself. We've got a detective assigned right now to the DEA task force. Finance, Chief Moore, and the city manager and myself consistently receive updates saying that we've been awarded this percentage of this seizure. So that's a a self-funding fund, if you will.
Within about the last 3 or 4 days, I think we've had about $15,000 deposited from asset seizures. And our percentage was about that much.
And so that miscellaneous there really will go into training?
Outside training, yes, ma'am. We prefer to leave it miscellaneous. That way if some unanticipated costs occur other than training needs, it'll give us the luxury, the leeway to use it as needed. TCA and federal guidelines do pretty closely regulate what you can use the drug fund for. It can't be reoccurring cost. We do very closely manage what is allowed and what isn't.
I've got one question. It's some clarification where it says evidence purchased. That sounds like a strange column.
What that is, sir, is when the drug officers go out to make when they go out to make controlled buys, if we set up a meeting with someone selling drugs, evidence purchased is if we go to buy $1,000 worth of cocaine, it'll come out at $6,500.
Go and purchase it from the drug dealers.
We try to get the best deals we can.
Oh, my.
Goodness. But I noticed here that this stays almost the same because there isn't the machinery and equipment cost that we had budgeted for 2011.
Right.
Are there other comments?
I have a question. If we can go back to the personnel budget. I know what our vacancy adjustment is on the first page. Vacancy adjustment, we're reflecting the same number as we did in the previous budget.
That's those.
We'll have to totally update that, but we're planning to use the same 3% number for vacancy assumption that we did before. And that number should probably be a little bit higher. I think we just carried over the old number, but...
Okay, so obviously this is the vacant positions that you're not going to ask to be filled.
That's correct. We
But it's also going to be a vacancy that occurs when turnovers, when somebody leaves and you have to hire somebody else and there's a number of months maybe.
The direction that we've been given from the city administrator is to anticipate filling those vacancies as they come available. We currently have 4 funded vacancies. But you are correct. There is a lag time from the period that the vacancy presents itself to the time that we're able to fill it.
Okay, so the question I'm going to ask is, is this formula reasonable, that you're not having to hold off on a position because of what the budget says on
Yes.
this?
No, we're not holding off. And actually, what that number does account for as well is we've got several people who are funded, filled positions who are not receiving a paycheck. Lieutenant Chris Gentry, who's in Afghanistan and has been for the whole year. Sergeant David Mullins, who's in the Air Force and has been in Colorado Springs for the entire year. Those are funded positions. They're not drawing a salary because they haven't been here. So that does allow us a bit of cushion in that respect.
And this does reflect that 3% planning assumption that we use in budgets. It's anything that's unfunded is reflected in that total number that's estimated. So if we don't fund a position, it's in that total number. It's reflected in the total number we budget for. But that negative number that is the vacancy adjustment reflects that 3% planning assumption that we make. And just so you know, what I've told departments is that's a planning number. And we know that there can be years that will fluctuate, and especially in a smaller department. If you don't have turnover, you don't have turnover, and we'll have to adjust. But our history shows us we're well in excess of this 3%, and that will really sort of wash out through the whole budget, and we'll have to adjust. I don't want people having to make moves you wouldn't make operationally to just hit a vacancy number. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to stretch our dollars and to recognize there's a natural turnover that happens in an organization our size, and this helps us really better allocate our dollars within a total budget.
Any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Moore, for, I guess, is this your last
This
meeting?
is his last official
Last meeting, other than the
board
big.
interaction.
I wouldn't capture that smile.
Now, let's see. Now
I
we'll
think
go
you did a
back
great job when you
to
opened it up for him.
our regular order of business, which was item 3. Now, the sole source purchase from JWC Environmental.
How are you all this evening? We, in July of last year, we had approached you and requested approval for a similar purchase. We have 2 commonators at the wastewater plant at the influent structure. And one had failed in June of 2010, and the other one failed shortly thereafter in September of 2010, and we're at this time requesting to replace that second failed unit. We are again going with a reconditioned device simply because it's approximately half the cost of a new one, and the warranty period is the same, so we view this as a better bang for the buck, so to speak. Request your recommendation to approve to the board.
And actually, that was
So it's coming.
budgeted.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, but it's coming in under budget,
Yes,
slightly, but a little bit. It's good.
slightly, yes.
Any comments or you ready
Looks
for
good.
a motion to send this on?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And then we have a sole source purchase from Ashbrook Simon Hartley.
Yes, ma'am. We have belt presses for our biosolids, which essentially, at the wastewater treatment plant, which essentially dewaters the material before we put it in trucks to haul it off to the landfill. The units, the 2 presses that we have in operation currently have been at the plant since 2001. This is about the life cycle in which you'll start seeing these things deteriorate. We had an evaluation done I think it was in 2009, at which point we were probably had exceeded the 75% life of the equipment, and we've been keeping a close eye on it since. And we had again budgeted for this. We budgeted $30,000, approximately $31,000 less than the actual bid that came in. But the reconditioning of these presses is important for us at this point, so we can continue the pressing operation and the biosolids management.
And they are the only people that do this?
Yes, ma'am.
Basically.
There is, again, it's about $31,000 over budget. We do have realized some cost savings and some other equipment purchases. We're working through a procurement with purchasing right now on under term consumer vehicles. We believe we're going to be approximately $14,000 under on those purchases at the wastewater treatment plant alone, as well as the UV bulbs and ballast at the wastewater treatment plant, where it provides the disinfection for the wastewater before going into the Harpeth River or into the reclaimed distribution system. We think that there's another player on the market here, and we think it looks like we're going to be about $20,000 to $25,000 under budget on that as well. So we feel we can cover the cost differential here.
So what's the usage life on these?
On the presses, we're not going to be purchasing new ones. It's essentially reconditioning. We need to get belts and rollers and a lot of the other appurtenances that go with it. It's anywhere from 8 to 10, 12 years if you get lucky, but this seems to be well within the range of its life cycle.
For the reconditioned?
Yes, sir.
We're talking 10 years here then, right?
Hopefully, yes, barring any problems.
So you think you're going to be 25,000 ahead on the other?
On the UV bulbs and ballast purchase, which we will hopefully be bringing before you here in the next couple of months, we expect to be $20,000 to $25,000 under budget on that.
Okay, so where do we get the extra money for, because we're still short?
The vehicle purchases at the wastewater treatment facility, we have 3 vehicles that we're going to be requesting this year to replace some of the fleet that's aging.
Those are budgeted replacements.
Those are budgeted replacements, and based on the statewide contract that Brian has worked with, the vehicles that we are going to be requesting are about $14,000, excuse me, just over $13,000 under budget as well, assuming you approve that. then-
All together?
So, right, so
That
that
would,
is.
all right, that would take
Yeah,
care
around
of it.
47.
So we'll come out ahead on that.
Correct.
Good. All right.
Any other comments?
So move for approval on this second expenditure to recommend it to the board.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5 is the consideration of goals for the fiscal year 2011-2012 budget.
And really what we provided you at this point is the goals you provided us with last time, at last year's budget, and wanted to get any guidance you have. We had sort of some generic goals or more general goals, financial, non-financial, and then some specific initiatives for that year, and would welcome any feedback you have or items you would like to either adjust or add to this that aren't reflected, and would suggest that we then bring that to the board at a work session to get the full board's feedback. This gives us just some good guidance overall as we're formulating the budget we will recommend to you the first part of May.
I have a couple of comments. In the financial goals at the top, we've indicated we want to maintain an undesignated reserve fund in compliance with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen's adopted policy on that. I think we ought to also refer to the adopted policy on, it's not debts, I think it's called debt service management or
The debt policy, whatever
the debt policy.
the formal
that's right.
name is for the debt policy.
Yes, that's right. And I was asking, I found material on that, and I know we saw this again recently, but I could not find anything that had updated numbers on our debt policy. Because I know whenever we were talking about the CIP some time ago, I mean, not recently, whenever we decided to fund those projects that we have indicated that we would fund, that made some changes in some of these things. And I just, as I say, maybe it was in that thing that came up, 2 or 3 months ago or whenever it was. I just didn't see my copy of it. I mean, at least, I'll put it this way. The thing that I did find was the one that said adopted by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in 2009. I did not see any updated numbers on it, but it may have just been that
We have done it within the year, but we can do, it's designed to be at your discretion to look at it. We have done since then some refunding, and we may be looking at some additional refunding as well. So Les, you may want to speak to timing and...
We actually, in conversations with PFM, we're going to bring this to you next month.
Okay.
We do need on the debt policy some language changes because the comptroller has issued a model debt policy, and there is some required language that is pretty much we have covered in ours, but it's not exactly what they require. So we need to amend that debt policy. I would point out that there's a debt policy that basically says what type of debt we can go out and have. Can you have variable? How much can you have as that as a percentage? That's really the policy. I think what you're talking about is the funding capacity model.
Exactly.
And that's what we need to get working on. But I think we do have to get our forecast of revenues, as we talked about earlier in this meeting, and some of the forecast of budget for this next year before we go through the process of updating that, or we're just going to have to turn around and do it again once we pass the budget. So we're kind of honing in on that, but we were going to take the first step in March and probably bring back a bigger step in May when we have the full budget put together and we can plug those numbers in that we've decided on.
And there are some adjustments we need to make to be in line with the state model policy,
Yes.
which I would mention was significantly influenced by the work this city did in developing a municipal debt policy and guidelines.
Most definitely.
I think that's important to recognize.
Yes.
And I just didn't know whether the benchmarks had changed. Well, I'm sorry, not the benchmarks, but the way we are situated versus the benchmarks. Because what I had, at least what I found, appeared to be like 2009. It may have been the 2010 fiscal year.
We're always running about a year behind. What happens is all of the audit reports are really due December 31st. So S&P and Moody's will update those numbers over the course of the first 3 or 4 months of the year, and they produce those benchmarks and publish them sometime 1st of May to the end of June, somewhere in that time period. So we kind of wait for those benchmarks, but we're also waiting to find out what Dublin, Ohio, and Naperville, Illinois, and those other specific cities that we chose to benchmark ourselves against. Their audits are just now becoming available, and PFM has started the process of processing that information.
And as a part of that, we also said we had a policy on debt service as a % of operating expenditures, and that just should be for us. And again, I didn't compare this to something else because everything I found had that June 2009 when we actually began, whenever we approved the original policy there. And I didn't see any of those updated in terms of our debt. And so
I think some of that was included in, I think it was the September Finance Committee
was that the time when
we had the web.
We had the
She came in on the
right,
web.
and so maybe that's the reason I didn't.
I think it was included in that presentation, but we glossed over that just a little bit because of time, and we were really looking at some of the things other than the actual benchmarks that time.
Yes, that's that.
Because we were in the process of issuing debt.
Funding discussion at that
Yes,
point. too.
indeed.
So
And
that,
we
I think we
were
spent
working-
more of our time on that, but we did do an update at that time. So we can, in conjunction with this work through March into April and May, give you that
Right.
update as well.
And that information still should be on the website
I could not find
in
it.
the
That's
September
good.
agenda. I'll take a look at that and send it back out if it's
We'll
not
get it on
posted.
there.
Okay, good. But I think that we probably, since we have, as a part of financial goal, that the compliance with the board policy on undesignated reserve, that was our other big policy decision, was on, as I say, debt management, or I don't have the name of it again, but anyway, the debt. So I'd like to see that. The other idea I thought about, and we covered this, we kind of cover some things that are similar to this, but in the, and maybe this would be in the non-financial goals, I said, and this is not well said, maintain and enhance infrastructure to continue to improve quality of life. We mentioned quality of life up here, but I think we need to indicate the work that we're doing on water and preparing for our infrastructure there. And when we do have a comment about roadway projects, but to me, keeping up with the infrastructure and enhancing that is one of the aspects that certainly goes to quality of life here. And again, I didn't say it well, but
yeah, we can
anyway,
work with that.
you can say better than I do. That was the other thing. Some of these others might need to be tweaked a little bit because I'm not sure they're quite as timely
Right.
as they were before. But those,
Some of these have been there for a couple years, and
Yes.
I think we just sort of pulled them along, so we might want to look at some of those, or either updating them, or maybe they're not as relevant as they were a couple years ago.
that would be good. I don't have any specific suggestions on that, but yes,
We'll look at that. We'll
look
try to
at that
incorporate
and
that.
see what your thoughts are on that. Yes.
In here, looking at these budget goals, I don't see anything that addresses us pursuing additional ways for revenue for our departments to come up with additional revenues, such as, let me give you an example. We own the old golf house at the country club, where is now the Battle of Franklin battlefield. that building, we are doing some work out there. And Eric, we've talked about this, and it's something I'd like to bring up. We've gotten a new roof on that building, which was sorely needed. We have people in groups using that facility, but because we don't have a kitchen at all, we have no water source except for in the bathrooms there. We do have some planning going on in that one area, but outside the kitchen area, we have a plan for a sink, a wet sink in there. But that kitchen has been pretty much gutted now and things removed. But I look at sources. Now, this is just one example. There may be other things out there, too. But the city owns that property. We're sitting on a revenue source that we've not utilized. And I understand it takes money to make money here because we're going to have to fix that up. And we have some money in the budget that Parks has, and they're applying some of that money this budget season in the painting and, of course, the new roof and the new awnings for outside. I mean, internally, if we could get some sources of revenue to fix that kitchen up, not talking making it state-of-the-art in any shape, way, or form, just functional and just with smart thinking of how we could do this to make it usable, that caterers can come in and use this, because we have people in groups all the time looking to use this facility, and we're missing the opportunity to draw more revenue on a consistent, and I'm talking consistent basis here, because I'm approached all the time. I've talked to Lisa Clayton numerous times about how many people in groups want to use this facility and aren't able to because their hands are tied with the facility, the use of the facility, the lack thereof of sink and maybe warming ovens and things like that, and just a typical refrigerator. And I know that we've discussed a little bit of this. I've talked to Eric about it briefly, and I know Mike's had some conversations with some people too that I sent his way that had contacted me. But I would like for us to see what we could do in the next budget and not break the bank, but just smartly address this so we can start realizing some revenue that we're missing out on.
Perhaps we would look at that whenever Parks comes up.
Yeah, that'd be a good one when they
Right.
come up. And I would say the second bullet, in a general sense, gets at that. In terms
I
of
saw that.
Diversifying
Yeah.
our revenue, looking at
Yeah.
other income opportunities.
Yeah.
It has other broader issues in it, so it's a pretty big item, but to me, that's all part of that picture
And
in terms of what are your opportunities, what's the cost benefit of investing there, and
Yes.
what does that opportunities does that create for you?
I did see that, and I think if we can apply that even more so, more specific, add something to it that says to encourage our department heads and our department staff, people in those departments, to be creative, thinking of ways that we can diversify and bring in additional revenue and enhance what we already own and what we have, where we can come up with good ideas, and maybe a staff employee or someone that comes up with a great idea. And we need to encourage them to do that because we need all the help we can get in those kinds of areas.
We can address that
Yeah.
more specifically.
When we get to Parks, and
Yeah.
and this bullet
just wanted
2
to
would
bring it up.
probably
Yeah.
cover that.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Now let's see.
If the group is comfortable, the committee's comfortable, we'll do some
Do some-
updating and drafting. And if
Yeah,
you're
we'll do.
okay, we can just bring it to a work session.
Yeah. That
Because it'd be
sounds
good to get the
good.
whole board to chime in
Yes,
and
yes.
move
Yes.
it
Yeah,
forward.
it's all,
Yes.
Very good.
All good.
And let's see, so now we're ready for the fire department.
Number
Item
6.
6. Thank you for allowing police to go in front and say,
Thank you.
You have those water hoses. You could squirt those water hoses in. Good point, Rocky.
He's a wise man.
Good evening. Thanks for this opportunity. I'd like to begin basically by saying that we certainly understand that current economic status of our community, of our nation. And our challenges as a group is emergency services. How do you offer emergency services? And what are high-performing levels of emergency services compared to adequate? And if you look at the word adequate in Webster's dictionary, it means satisfactory. And I don't think any of us sitting at this table wants that in our emergency services in our community. I think our citizens demand more, our visitors in our community as well demand more of our emergency service and our capabilities. For the last 2 years, we have been a team player in acknowledging that we need to maintain a certain percentage of vacancies in our organization. I'm asking this year, we have maintained 5 unfunded positions over the last 2 years. I'm asking this year to maintain only 2 unfunded positions. And certainly, when you talk about funded and unfunded positions, it's kind of like pay me now or pay me later on 2 sides of the budgets. We've seen potentially by having unfunded positions that maybe there was a savings in our regular pay status, but we have prided ourselves since 2006 of reducing our overtime budget, and now we're looking at a steadily increase in our overtime budget because of our unfunded positions. And so that is certainly one criteria that I would list there. And the need for us in our minimum staffing requirements when it comes to emergency services.
Maybe you want to make your presentation, then we'll come and ask questions.
Okay.
Because we have something to ask about that. Let's go ahead.
In your handout here on your first page with 5, there's one other caveat I would like to talk about very briefly, and that is professionalism and how we go about it in the Franklin Fire Department. In 2005, our department potentially had 64% of the employees that received their mandatory in-service training through the state of Tennessee, through the Fire Commission. I'm very, very proud to say since then we worked diligently on that aspect of bringing professionalism as a major caveat to our organization. And mindful and prideful of that fact, you will notice on here our delivery of in-house continuing education credit for our medical recertification. We are 100% on that. And also of our fire suppression in-house training mechanisms. We are 100%. And I'm very proud of that fact, of all the employees in the fire department and the strides we've made to accomplish these measures. Now, the external factors that hurt us from that perspective is the budget control measures that we all experience currently. How are we going to maintain that level of professionalism if we are continuing to cut our budgets in our training and professional development? And so that is one area that I think we ought to really look at strongly. Assistant Chief Horton and Deputy Chief Mike Culberson have done a vast amount of work this year about on our capital outlay over the next year. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Assistant Chief Horton.
Thank you, Chief. I would like to reiterate what the Chief was talking about, specifically with our unfunded positions. And we can use the May flood as an example. Certainly none of us could predict the May flood, nor can we predict many emergencies that come our way. And it is just essential that staffing be maintained at a level adequate to deal with anything that comes our way. As Chief Moore alluded to, the meth lab situation that is migrating toward us does not just affect the police department. anytime you have meth involved, it taxes the fire department tremendously as well. There is a large hazard there, not only to our responders, but to the police responders as well, and we play a large role in that. So I just admonish you to continue to consider that request as we move forward in the budget process. I also provided you a revised budget document as part of the handout, which you will see a decrease in the overall amount that we are asking for. We inadvertently allowed a budget document to go out that reflected a larger increase than what we were actually asking for, and we apologize for that, but you should see that new revised document as part of the handout.
Later on, you can take credit for a cut, though.
Yes, sir. I would like to point out again, as we've already stated, and I won't belabor the incident about personnel costs. Some of our personnel increases are certainly due to the 2% and the initial 6 months of that. We also have several paramedics that are in training that will be graduating in this next budget process. So there's about $13,650 for that increase in pay. We also have one EMT that will be graduating, so there's a $1,200 incentive pay for that. And then there's $30,000 allocated in this budget year for step-up pay. An HR rule change that happened this year now requires us to pay everyone who steps up to fill a position instead of just the first position. We don't really have a track record in which to gauge what that might cost, so we've allocated $30,000 as a tentative figure, and certainly as budgets proceed and as we look at what our actual expenditures are, we will adjust that figure to be more closely with what experience shows us. You'll also notice that there is a significant increase in our operational budget this particular year. That amount comes to about $529,000 in an increased request. The board is fully aware that for the last 2 years, the fire department has cut out all capital expenditures from its budget process. Now with the threshold going from $10,000 to $25,000, many items that would normally fall under capital now fall under operations. And so that accounts for a significant increase in our operational expenditures. But I would like to point out and highlight just a few of what those expenditures amount to. Fire Station 3, when it was originally designed, the pavement was not designed for the load that it was expected to carry, which was apparently an oversight in the design committee over that particular station. But due to the wear and tear of that pavement, it has gotten to the point where it is necessary to not only repave, but to replace the pavement. Our streets department, along with our annual paving contract vendor, have both looked at that, and that's going to be about a $45,000 cost that normally we would not have incurred in this budget year. We also have, as you know, our oldest station is a 1994 station, so it's got a significant number of years on it. We have 2 stations that are in need of remodeling, especially of the kitchen area. We've taken on some small remodel projects as the budgets have proceeded, but now there's a couple of large remodel projects, so there's a total of $100,000 in operations specifically for a remodeling of these stations, which will obviously go away in subsequent years until the next station is ready for remodel. We also, as the chief talked about, for training, we do have some additional training funds for in-house training for our hazmat team, for our high-angle rescue team, and also for our medical trained personnel. That's added about $48,000 to the budget this year, which we have cut out in the last 2 years. We also have, like the police department has an ongoing cycle for a replacement of staff vehicles, we also have an ongoing cycle for replacement of our fire suppression clothing that we wear. We had been on a 5-year cycle, but we are now on a 7-year cycle. And we have determined that it's not in our best interest to continue to delay the replacement of our fire suppression gear. So we're asking for about $55,000 this year to replace the gear that will be about 7.5 years in the next budget process.
Which number is that?
The turnout gear is under the specialized uniforms, which is actually under operating supplies. It is category 83-265.
Okay, yeah, I got it, right here. Just wondering, I just looked all over for that.
Okay. We also have, in this particular budget, 3 staff vehicles that are in need of replacement that falls under the operations because it is below the 25,000 threshold. We certainly will, as we continue through the budget process, to explore the leasing options, but right now, for consideration and for your review, we put the full amount of those 3 vehicles in here. That's a cost of about $73,500. We certainly expect that leasing option might drop that. Should we proceed with that, the leasing option might drop that to about $20,000 a year, 25 roughly over a 3-year period if that's the route and the direction that we're given. We also we have vehicle rescue equipment in the budget this year. Our extrication equipment is probably approaching about 18 years for the oldest set. The cars today are being made out of much stronger material. It is becoming increasingly difficult to get repairs done to these pieces of equipment. So we are asking, and we are actually scaling back. Currently, the fire department has 3 fully equipped extrication vehicles. But our history has shown that we only average about 10 extrications a year. And so we are actually changing our method of operation and scaling down from 3 fully equipped rescues to 1 fully equipped rescue, and then some smaller extrication equipment for some individual stations to do lighter extrication. So in this particular case, we're asking for $60,000 to replace that rescue equipment, and we are currently waiting an answer from the UASI group, which we hope that the UASI is going to fund this purchase, and if so, the $60,000 will come out of the budget. But not knowing whether that funding is available, it is currently in here as a necessary procurement. We also have in here $31,000 for RAD 57 monitors, and these monitors are used to monitor the health and well-being of the firefighters as they exit the structure of a working fire. These devices, we have made the first round of grant cuts with the Assistance to Firefighter grants, and we're hopeful that we will be awarded a grant to replace those. In addition, this $31,000 would come out of the budget if that's awarded to us. We also have some additional thermal imaging cameras. As you know, these are life-saving devices that our firemen use when they go inside of a working fire, especially to give them sight where otherwise sight would not be available. We have 3 of our older cameras that are in need of replacement, and those are about $10,000 a piece, so there's a $30,000 expenditure there. As we move into capital expenditures, you'll notice on your revised sheet that I passed out that there's about $789,000 of capital increase. Again, we've foregone capital in the last 2 budget years, so this is simply arriving at the point where delay is really not an option anymore. But in this, there's 2 significant items. One is the design of 2 fire stations, the design of the West Haven and the design of the Goose Creek fire stations, which normally would be appropriated to facilities tax, is currently in the general fund budget at a cost of $312,000. We believe that designing these 2 stations at one time will see a savings, and it will not be quite the $312,000, but we don't know yet quite what that expected expenditure will be. Again, I just emphasize that that's normally in the facilities tax budget, but is currently, until we receive further direction, in the general fund budget.
Did you say it was for both?
That's the design of 2 fire stations, yes. We also have in this particular budget $132,000 for additional tornado warning sirens that the board received a presentation on a few months back. This number also is normally reflected in the facilities tax account. It's here presented in our general fund budget.
This is 4 sirens, is that right?
Yes, 4 additional tornado sirens. The other large expenditures for this particular budget is the replacement of our 3 rescue chassis. 3 of our rescue chassis are the Ford F-550s that were on a class action lawsuit that extended the warranty of those vehicle chassis for a time period. That time period is now up. And what we've seen is we've seen an average of about $10,000 per vehicle in maintenance cost as attributed to this class action lawsuit. Those are dollars that we've not had to absorb up to this time, but will have to absorb if we keep these units in service. In addition to that cost, significant downtime is being noted by these vehicles being out of service, which puts, as you know, medical calls primarily are run with these 3 vehicles, so that now shifts that medical call load when these are out of service to our fire trucks. So increased gas usage, increased wear and tear on those vehicles, for which we are trying to avoid. Deputy Chief Culberson has did a tremendous job in looking at alternatives for this as we move forward. The Chief, I'm sure, may talk about, again in this process, about our endeavor to look toward the possibility of EMS transport. So what we are proposing to do in this particular budget is replace the 3 existing chassis with a chassis that will not only fulfill the need immediately, but if we end up going to transport in the future, EMS boxes can be purchased and put on these exact same chassis. So our investment is something that will carry us through for several years down the road, and we wouldn't bear additional costs now and then turn around if we do endeavor to do transport, and we wouldn't have to expose additional cost for that. Those 3 vehicles right now are in the budget at a cost of $85,000 apiece. Again, we do believe there's several lease options, and we have looked into those. We will, if that's the direction we've given, we'll be presenting a revised budget with lease options, and we believe that we can get all 3 of those vehicles on about a $75,000 a year lease for a potentially 5-year lease program, as opposed to the full amount in one budget year. We also have a battalion chief vehicle replacement in that budget, and we have a 10% down payment for a replacement ladder truck. Ladder 4 is 15 years old at present, and we have a need to begin the process of replacing that vehicle, and we would transition Ladder 4 into a reserve ladder truck, which we currently do not have in our department. And with that, we would certainly entertain any questions, unless the chief has anything he'd like to add.
I think we can go to questions at this point.
On the discussion about adding transportation, where are we with that, and are we still collecting numbers?
What we said we do in this budget is really start the process of studying it, and what the chief has done is formed an internal team of folks to help oversee that, and now we're moving forward with getting some outside assistance to help us look at the business case, the pros and cons of how this might work, how this might impact us from both a service and a financial standpoint. So Rocky may want to comment further about the timing of that process, but I don't imagine we'll have a decision to make in this budget. It probably is a little further out from that, and we're trying to take our time and look at this fully and understand what it means for us in terms of service delivery and cost and revenue implications.
As Eric alluded to, many of our senior staff, as well as internal committee, has studied this, and just yesterday we passed off to Brian Wilcox, I don't know if you even know this yet, Eric, a draft proposal to go out, request for proposal, or RFP, for a consulting service to come in and do a feasibility study of whether or not we make this decision. And it will be a board decision, obviously. So, you know, we're working hard to try to get the things done on our side that we need to do to give you all the proper information that you need to make an informed decision, and that's the best I could say at this point.
Okay.
So we're looking at this as a revenue source?
It can generate revenue because you can receive payment for the transport that we do not receive today. But it's also a service question in terms of, you know, we already send staff that have, paramedic training and those capabilities. They're getting there. You saw our average response time is around 4 minutes and 25 seconds right now. Is that to the benefit of the citizen we're trying to serve? And then there is also the ability to get some reimbursement for those services that we do not receive today. but we'd be providing more services or completing that whole picture in terms of service delivery if we do the full transport. So you got to look at all of it from a financial standpoint, from a service delivery standpoint, from what implications are for equipment and staffing. All of those are factors that we'll look at, and I think the feasibility angle is what we want to look at, and really what's the business case for doing it, what's the service implications, all of that.
So, do departments generally have fire and, I guess, ambulance service, if you want to say that, put together? I don't know.
A lot of communities do. In fact, one of the first things I ever did as a budget analyst in the city of Dayton, Ohio, was study the implementation of an EMS fee that now generates about $3 million a year in that city. And so that's one of the things that you can look at in terms of...
Are you saying generates $3 million
A year.
Clear
of revenue.
of revenue, and you mean after you subtract the cost of it?
Yes, ma'am, and we'd like that all earmarked back to the fire
That's the total revenue generated in that city, a larger city than Franklin. But you can get Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, all provide for a reimbursement schedule essentially for those services based on the type of services provided in a transport. So that's something to look at. That's not the only reason we're looking at it. There are real service delivery considerations to look at it, and we continue to look at a service that is 70 to 75% emergency medical. And so how do we gear to more fully meet that service need in the community as well as the other aspects of it?
And this comment's been made before, but really we're much more medical emergency than we are actually fire.
Yes, ma'am. We are an EMS service that still makes fire calls.
Well, no, I mean, but that's really...
Yes, ma'am. That's
really
the reality.
That is the reality of it.
And strategically, over the last several years, we've planned for this long term. We started out with about 5 paramedics when I got here, and we've got about 28 and a few more in school, and we'll continue that trend since medical calls do dominate our overall call volume. And we have to look at it from a service delivery standpoint because we're strategically located in our communities. Our response times are wonderful, 4 minutes. And so technically, our firefighters could get on the scene, stabilize the patient, and transport the patient in the time now that we have to wait for an ambulance to get there to transport the patient, and then we don't recoup any of the fees. They get all the fees. And we're providing
service too.
We're providing some operating costs. We're expending operating costs on these calls, and we're not recouping anything from that. So.
And I just this week read an article about a fast-growing community, not in our county and not in a neighboring county, but somewhere in Middle Tennessee, where the fire service, is one of the municipal services that they are lacking. And I think we need to play up the fact that we have a very good fire and medical, as you're stating here. But that does, I didn't realize that all cities didn't have something like this until I read that. And as I say, it's somewhere in Middle Tennessee.
Well, that particular community, the citizens took that for granted, that was provided by the county, not a volunteer service.
Let's get some questions because we have some specifics.
You said we do the service now, which we're not being recouped. We don't recoup our cost. Could we?
No, ma'am, not according to the way the system is set up at this current time.
So it would have to be. There would have to be.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get us off.
That's right.
I want to know that because I think it's part of the discussion for the future here of what we're going to do. But
it doesn't include this budget year.
No. That's why we're looking at the feasibility.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, in that we're not going to address that. The feasibility, though, if there's a way to recoup that cost without,
I believe that's one of the bullet points that we're going to ask the consulting firm is what are the alternatives that we could look at
Yeah.
to collect some type of fees as well.
Yeah, okay. That might definitely
Just
be
some
okay.
specifics on what we're looking at now. I noticed, and I'm assuming this is on the change, the revision that we have here too, but it shows overtime pay, and then it also showed that in 2009 there was no fire holiday pay, but in 2010 there was, and there's estimated for our fiscal year that we're currently in right now. How does that come in?
That code was created in 2010, and even though it was used, then when we created the 2011 budget, it was not separated, so we realized that's what it appeared. So in 2011, it's actually up with the regular pay.
Oh, okay, because I saw that was, Sergeant, so is that
Previously, it was in general wages.
just in general wages?
It's separated so we can track it.
Exactly.
So is I'm sorry, that is overtime or is not?
Holiday pay is
Yes.
paid at an overtime rate.
Right, that's, okay, that's what I was really getting to. Okay, that's one of them. And then, and I know you've talked about some of these things over here. I'm looking at the old page 3, and it may be on the page 3 here. But building repair and maintenance services, those were the things that you named, the kitchens,
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the fire suppression, or the uniforms, the specialized uniforms.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think as I went through that. And on page 4, on the machinery equipment, is that the vehicles? I mean, is that the fire vehicles there, or is that under capital?
No, that does include 3 of the staff vehicles in that because they do fall below the $25,000 threshold, so they've been moved into operations. As well as it includes the things that I was discussing about the potential grant items that we have for the vehicle rescue equipment and the RAD-57 monitors, as well as the 3 thermal imaging cameras that I talked about that were in need of replacement. Those are also in that equipment fund. And then we have some necessary hose and additional mannequins and cascade cylinders, things that are just necessary for operations in that as well.
So the big change, well, the big changes wouldn't just be the 3 vehicles, it would be all of it, wouldn't it?
Yes, ma'am, that's
Because
correct.
that's quite an increase.
Because, again, normally those would have been capital items, so they would have came under capital, and we've foregone capital for 2 years now.
Well, even with your revision here, I had figured out it was a 16.6% increase, and I don't have my calculator to do this now, but it's still,
It's 11.32%
Yeah.
increase, and again, I would point out that if we removed the items that would normally be charged to facilities tax, it would be down to a 7.71% increase overall.
is that for, which one? Taking out the,
Taking
well,
out the
the thing
designer.
is, there's not going to be any change on that this year, because we'll have at least one more year before we can get back to levels on the facilities tax. It may be more than that, but
Right, but I think it's important for the board just to
Right.
recognize that those charges we would normally not incur in the general fund budget.
I had a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Question about the extractions. You said that your total number of extractions were 10. Is that the trend?
We average about 10.
That's kind of a long time average,
Yes, sir, that's over about the last 5 years.
and I guess I'm visualizing that those are lower impact crashes. I mean, we just don't have many high-speed crashes within the city. Is that why we have such a...
Some of those are high-speed crashes. Many of those are interstate-related accidents that that require extrication to be done. Many of our vehicles, even though they're being made of stronger materials as far as the core of the vehicle, we still have the fiberglass vehicles and these other things that can cause vehicle doors to become jammed that require extrication to take place. But those can be mainly high-impact crashes that require extrication.
Another thing are the cameras, and I'm certainly for the firemen having all the safety devices they need, but I thought somewhere in the back of my mind that we just bought some cameras. Were those replacing other ones that had aged
Yes,
out?
sir.
Yes, sir.
So this is just another run of replacement.
That's correct.
For all of our first-line apparatus, we provide them with a camera. That means that crew, when they get on the scene, can go into operations mode immediately if rescue is needed. And that is very crucial to our overall what we do.
And the technology, comparing some of these older infrared cameras and the new versions is incredible too. So.
Right, and you can't get parts for the old, is what we're finding.
Yeah,
And
really?
so therefore,
Sure.
That makes
That's
them
good.
obsolete to us after several
any
years
problem.
of service. And, we have even loaned those out when, Mark had some engines, some motors overheating at the waste facility plant. We gave him a camera he went and utilized that infrared heat device to be able to determine was that over its limit.
Any other comments?
Dr. Moore's sake, I would bring up the sustainability fact. And, we're constantly looking for ways to help us be greener in the fire department. As you know, we've mentioned video conferencing that we implemented over a year ago. Now we've included HR in our training for that, and also our EMS training is done utilizing video conferencing, which helps us maintain lower fuel cost long term. And I think it's providing a better service. I think HR is embracing that opportunity to reach all of our employees at one time in 3 sessions instead of 18 sessions. So,
Really?
yes, ma'am. So that's the kind of things we're still looking at.
That does
in the
help,
fire
doesn't
department,
it?
To be on the cutting edge.
Might be nice for them to consult with us. If we go from 18 to 3.
Very good comment.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
I appreciate your service to the community.
Thank you.
Item number 9, thank you very much. Item number 9 is consideration of proposers for the annual audit.
It was 4 years ago that we last asked for proposals from auditing firms. We actually asked for a 3-year contract, and then because of the stimulus money and some of the hiccups that we expected from that, we didn't really want to change auditors in midstream. So, long story short, it's time to go out with an RFP for auditing services. When we did this 4 years ago, we were quizzed by the Finance Committee and by the Board in general and asked if we would consider not allowing the existing auditor to bid. The reason was not because they did a poor job, but because they had been doing it for almost 18 years. Yeah. And there comes a time when it's good and healthy to change auditors. Our question to you, as the Finance Committee acting as the Audit Committee, is do you want us to do that again? The firm that we're with now has only been with us again for 4 years. Should we allow them to bid again, to be part of this proposal? Obviously, the more proposers that we have in this process, the higher the likelihood that we're going to get an attractive proposal in terms of the pricing. I always hate to exclude any vendor that wants to be there, but I also understand the position of the board 4 years ago that it had been so long since we had made a change, and new auditors tend to find new things. So we bring this to you only, this was a routine matter that we would normally do. but we bring it to you because of this one issue. Should we allow the existing vendor to make a proposal this time?
Well, unless there's been any problems or any inefficiencies with them, I don't see why we shouldn't allow them, because they've only been with us 4 years. And, you know...
I think the comment, though, that a change, brings something in, brings something new, and I assume that the ones from 4 years ago, I have no idea about this, also had done an excellent job. In my opinion, our current auditors have done a very good job. But I can also, after reading about this, see the point in just getting new eyes on something.
This is strictly a preference item. I mean,
That's
There's a lot of difference in 4 years and 18 years.
Sure is.
I think we need to hit a happy medium, because also there's an unfamiliarity that also constricts the process. Yeah. Yes, you got new eyes and you'll see new things, but sometimes you may stumble over something that somebody more experienced would know. I want to look at this in particular because this. So I think maybe 4 years is too short a time to not allow them to rebid, but somewhere between 4 and 18, I think we need to land
Somewhere in there.
on an agreement. So.
Is there any thought that they would be the lowest bidder? I mean, I'm asking the question because I would assume that everybody that bids would be qualified.
They
Maybe I'm
absolutely
wrong.
will
Have to be.
exclude them. So the
no,
qualifications are not an
But the
issue.
question here is go forward without limitations or go forward and disqualify it. And I, for one, don't want to disqualify our current vendor on this.
Well, we're the ones being audited, and that's why we come to you. We really need direction from you on
Yeah.
this. So we would like to
Yeah.
have some kind of a motion
So
to go ahead.
should we
Great.
get
I
a motion?
I move that we go with option 2 and go forward with the RFP process. Number one, without limitations. I'm sorry, option number 1, and go forward without limitations on the bid.
I'll second that motion.
Is there any other discussion?
I do think that at a later date, we need to have some discussion about what is a reasonable time
Right.
that you couldn't requalify. Is it 8 years, is it 12
I was
years?
going to say, would this be a 3-year, is that?
We would
is that-
propose going out for 3 years. That's
Yeah.
kind of the
That's right.
standard
Okay.
length of
Yeah.
term.
Okay.
It's only been 4 years because we had a little bit
We
of
had
an
that special
unusual
circumstance, didn't we?
So,
Okay, so any further
10, yeah,
comments?
that would
So
be-
all in favor of this, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Thank you.
That's it.
Let's see, we have the acknowledgement of the RFP process for a conference center audit. Do we have any?
Yeah, what's
answers
on
on
Ever
those?
since the conference center had opened, the Uri Howland Associates has done the audit, and maybe it's the same kind of question, is to put out the RFP, and maybe should we do it with the same firm, or should we basically take best proposer based on what we would put out? So it would be that they've been doing it since 1999, so that's probably about 10, 11 years.
Right, I see
So
what
it
you
would be,
mean.
do we exclude that firm
Yeah.
in putting out this proposal?
So this will be the 11th year?
I would add that there is a dramatic difference in the size and scope. Again, what we audited at the conference center is only the operational part,
right.
Yeah.
which is the rental of the premises and the provision of the food and beverages there, which is a much smaller project than all the
Our
departments
budget.
of the city.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
Oh, and I have a question. Do we have the audit, and then Williamson County also has a
Oh,
separate
that's a
audit?
good question.
No, we take the
Okay,
lead,
good.
and
Oh,
the
that's a
conference
good
center
question.
bears the expense, which is
Yeah.
50/50.
Okay.
And what we put in the RFP is that if there are municipal and county audit requirements, they have to adhere to both of
Oh,
them.
to
So I
both.
did
Okay,
read that.
there you go. Well,
Are we-
it is significantly less in this whole city budget, but I don't know if I want to disqualify them, but
Well, that's what we were talking about on
yeah.
Yeah, on the other one.
On the other one, I can see that on a huge city budget, but talking about operations here of a conference center. I don't know. I'm not, either way, I don't really care. I just, I don't care, Mike, what do you
So we've had the same company since 1999.
Since inception.
So what you're asking is,
And we've just re-engaged them
We
each
renew
time?
it every year, and one of the concerns that we have is there's a possibility that if we exclude them, no one else will bid, because it is a very small account. And we do need someone who's done municipal and county audits to do this.
I'm going to make a proposal that, a motion that we go ahead and allow them to bid and open it up for bidding and allow them.
And with that information on this bid, then maybe we can look at that in the same light as we considered the previous one.
Even though it's, the scope is much different,
It's so
I
small.
still think the idea, we ought to be kind of consistent, but I have no objection really if we do this. But as I say.
Yeah, I made a motion.
Did I second that? I'm
No,
sorry.
I got it.
I second.
Yeah, you're it, huh?
Actually, just three people, could I second?
Absolutely.
But we have to have three for a quorum, so.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
So maybe we'll
Okay,
get some.
and this is also, this next item, number 11, is the acknowledgement of the online budget manual for department and elected officials. We have a
Yeah, this would
copy here.
require no action, but we wanted to let you see that both police and fire had mentioned about receiving guidance. So what we've done is we've actually put this guidance out online, so that way anytime something new comes up, we're updating it and letting every department know it's been updated. So what it is, it's actually probably even a larger document than this, because the one thing you probably noticed in tonight's presentation is we actually have a new budget program. So we actually were using that up on the screen while the departments were talking, and on some of the capital items, or actually I think all the capital items, we actually had it detailed. So if we'd actually needed to see the detail on those items, the program already had that in
So
there.
where do we look at the detail that you're showing there?
It's on inside the city.
Inside the city.
Which means...
Which doesn't help.
It would be all the-
Doesn't help unless you're here
Well,
in the...
It is in your office, but we
Yeah.
we will probably, as we flesh this out and finalize these numbers, make it available.
Even the questions y'all have come up with tonight, we've actually got a place in there that we'll actually put that in once that's determined.
But as I say, no action on this. Item 12 is consideration of second quarter budget amendments.
This item actually would require action. What it is, we said that we would like to come every quarter with budget amendments. We actually came forth with the first quarter amendments a few months back. This actually is the next round of amendments that we've received. And if you actually look at the document, what we were hoping maybe would happen in your motion is after those original first quarter amendments were approved, we don't see that they actually came to the board in, I guess, the version or the form that we had presented it. So what we may ask in this action is not only approve the second quarter, but maybe also allow the first quarter to go to the board as well, even though it's already had your recommendation, but basically let the board action approve both sets. And if you look at the second quarter, the most material item is actually increasing the budget for the annual paving, which because of the flood back May had to be postponed. So in essence, that's the large item that you have here in the second quarter.
Well, let me tell you, that was a very large item even without this in fiscal year 2010. That street paving was. Are we, and I know that this will come up when we look at the street department, but are we on that kind of aggressive paving schedule that really costs a lot more money than what we get in street aid?
We cut back in the 11 budget to the amount that was estimated for gas tax only.
Okay.
So where we dropped from $2.5 million to, I think, $1.9 million, somewhere in that
I think
range.
so.
This was the carryover, though, from
Right.
the year when we had budgeted $2.5 million
right.
and had planned to use some general fund money to supplement the gas tax.
And this will require a draw out of the, I guess, fund balance.
It's actually a transfer from the general fund.
And it almost probably touches on the very next item, is you'll notice there also is a small request from our legal department of $1,500. One of the things that now has been given to the city administrator is approval to maybe approve smaller items. So even though we've included on the amendments for the board, it was possible that this item for $1,500 could have been approved by the city administrator based on the action that the board had given him. But I guess our recommendation would be to approve these second quarter amendments and also let the first quarter amendments go at the same time so that board action can be taken.
I'll make that motion.
All right, second.
Okay, so really the increase off of the fund balance is really $1.3 million.
For those
Right
two.
here.
Well, it's just, it has to be shown as an expense in both funds, basically in street aid to show the actual expense to the vendor
But I'm
and the
talking about the
expense.
fund balance, though, from the general fund. Because it's a transfer there,
We'll
right?
draw down the $600,000 and then transfer it over.
Yes.
So it's
So why did it say?
it shows it twice because we've got two entries to make.
Yes. Yeah, that's the only reason it's
We've
shown
got
twice.
to amend both budgets to do that.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
it
see.
affects
Yeah,
both
yeah,
street
yeah.
aid and the
So
general
that would make
fund.
sense.
Yes.
All right.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The next item relates to what Mike was speaking of, administrative action on the budget. You've given the city administrator that. This was just on there to report that no action has been
Okay.
taken by the city administrator to change any of the things in the budget.
So then, item 14 is consideration of amendment to financial advisory contract with PFM.
We have a contract with them. It's absolutely required now, and there's a great deal of detail. You actually have to have your financial advisors registered with the SEC under some of the new laws. We have a contract, but it's on an hourly basis. And in some of the items that we discussed earlier, the debt policy, the reserve policy, the debt capacity modeling to tie in with our capital improvements, there's a certain amount of work that they're going to do every year. And last year, the amount that they did exceeded $22,000 by a little bit, based on this hourly rate. We think we can contain that a little bit better and they've agreed to go on a retainer and just pay on $4,000 a quarter, which would be about $6,000 less than that. We have isolated now the work that they did specifically on bond issues.
Right.
Because
Because
that's wrapped
that
up
was
in
on-
the
yeah.
bond issue.
That's
But
huge, yeah.
it's both inappropriate and it looks pretty peculiar if you
Yeah.
roll some of these routine
Into the-
items that they do into the bond issues. A lot of people do it. I think it's more appropriate if we do it this way. I think at some point in time, the comptroller is going to require that we do it this way. We're kind of getting ahead of the
Yeah.
game by going ahead and doing this.
I got it, yeah.
I would recommend that we go ahead and do this year and we will continue to monitor the hours that they spend and the work that they do and compare it. And if they don't work the number of hours that we think that they should, and the hourly rates change, then we'll ask them for reductions next year, or they'll ask us for increases next year as we go along.
So we keep
And
track.
they originally came to us with, I believe it was $10,000
Yes.
per year was the original amount that we budgeted for that, not last year, but some years ago. So it's I see, well, more than double.
It has grown, but one of the things that happened is they came to many, many more meetings
Yeah.
than we ever anticipated them coming to. You know, most of that was originally for the work and a couple of appearances. And we asked them to come back time and time again as we kept expanding the body
Yeah.
of work that they do.
That's a lot of work.
And remember, they did a lot of work on those swaps on the bonds.
Oh, yeah, the bond things, yeah.
So, but still, It has changed from the original, it wasn't a contract, I guess it was a budgeted amount. As I say, the original budgeted amount was $10,000, as I recall.
The current contract actually is open-ended with
Right,
hourly rates
exactly.
for all of them. So legal has approved this, by the way, and made a couple of changes that's gone back to them. So when it goes to the board, we'll have some wording amendments to go with it. But if you would approve the concept and allow us to go ahead and let this travel on, I think that would be helpful.
I move that we recommend to the board to adopt the amendment that would change to the retainer building.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 15 was the update on the status of the advisory search.
Just
Did I have
a
anything?
reminder that on non-pension assets, I made a proposal that we hire someone to do a formal search for a firm to help us with non-pension investments that we have. And the board more or less approved it. I'm sorry, the committee more or less approved it, but asked that we drag our feet a little bit until rates go up before we start engaging someone else at some expense to do that. I think now is probably the time that we would start that engagement, with the idea that sometime between now and the fall, we'll complete that search and bring a candidate back to this committee for approval. So just an update. We'll plan to go ahead with that unless there's an objection.
No.
So this
Sounds
would
good.
be, you say non-pension investments, that would just be our basic, the fund balance and any...
Well, we have quite a bit of money.
Cash flow.
We have bond money that we have to keep invested. We have our reserves that we have to keep invested. We have deposits.
Yeah.
We have all of the tap fees
Numerous.
from the water and sewer department.
Oh, yeah.
When stormwater fees. When you add it all up, there's $40 million or so dollars to invest. So it's not an insignificant number. In the olden days, I mean, it was customary to just roll 90-day CDs. We can no longer really afford to do that, and that's why we're looking for some professional management that's in the market all the time and can do this for us.
So this is just an update for us?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Item 16, consideration of MIT contractual agreement for programming.
Well, just to set the table, Fred has tried desperately to replace some of our technical talent that has found greener pastures. And despite many efforts to try to do that, it's been very difficult. And he has located, and to be honest with you, we're looking at this as a more organized way of really being able to plug in the kind of talent that we need with a high level of technical expertise on a contractual basis from time to time when we need it. We're in the middle of a project on the utility billing that we've got a target date of January, and we can't wait until we go through another process to try to locate people that can do this work. Fred, if you'd like to add anything to that.
These are just kind of temp programmers?
Yeah, basically, if we approve the contract with Betco, then we can use their resources whenever, in and out type deal with them. I've looked at 3 or 4 different firms, and I've used some other firms locally here. The talent that this particular organization has is much better than the others. So I've looked at some resumes from this company as well as some others, and with the 3 vacancies that I have that haven't been filled for the year and a half or so, the cost will offset that. So what I'm asking for is just approval of the contract. And legal has already reviewed it, signed off on it. Eric's looked at it, signed off on it. So it does require board action, so that's what I'm asking for.
Okay. I'll make a motion for approval of the agreement of PACO, is it?
PACO.
As recommended.
And they are a national firm. It's not just that they're located in Brentwood, so they have resources that can come in.
That's good.
But the only thing we're paying would be an hourly. We're not paying any other things.
Right.
No travel.
All right.
Okay, so any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That's right. then the monthly reports are, I guess, informational.
We made money again.
That's right. Sales tax.
Yes, we did, and
Probably so, like that.
that's very pleasing, given the fact
Yeah.
that a lot of places have very much struggled this year. I think they're a little bit more sanguine about what their prospects are for next year, simply because as unemployment has stayed high and some of the conferences have found that people can't travel as much because of budget concerns. I think they've had some, if not cancellation of conferences, they've had some cutbacks in attendance, and that affects their bottom line. So I think they would like to come and make a presentation at your next meeting. And with your permission, we'll have them go ahead and do that. It'll be a kind of a long meeting with all the other departments, but it'll probably be good for you to hear from them and what their forecast is. We have not seen their estimates for next year, only perhaps a little whispering that, don't get your hopes up too high about the positive influence of next year.
Okay.
And we'll be, if you have any questions about any of these reports, you can send me an email or give me a call, and we'll be happy to.
Okay, so this is also no action. So read through and we did say that for next time we'd like to get some projections of revenues.
Yes.
It sounded kind of indicated from Eric that some of those would be.
We're close. What we don't want to do is give you something that we have to go back and correct later and get you to start thinking in terms of something, and then we do that. We've got thousands and thousands of general ledger numbers that we have to check every month and balance. And because we've just gotten the sales tax in, we still don't have notification of the state share taxes. We're still going back and verifying some of the other things that come in. We'd like to have the full 6 months, the first half of the year, completed and in final form for you to look at. And that way we can do something a little bit better than in the way of forecasting, hopefully a little more accurate. The State Funding Board did, I think it was on February 9th, they released what their forecast was, but there was no breakdown, at least not the published material that we had. We only had overall taxes, which includes, mineral severance taxes and all kinds of things that the state gets. We haven't seen an actual estimate yet on the sales tax in printed form of what they're forecasting. We are looking at some of the forecasts from the UTs and the MTSUs and the universities that have input into the State Funding Board, and we'll try to incorporate that in what our forecast is. It's such an unusual time, though, that it's very difficult when you have a drop as severe as what we had in 2008 and 9 to try to plot what the line looks like coming out of that. All the material that's in Governing Magazine and the Wall Street Journal and so on is basically saying that this next budget is going to be the worst one for the states, but the worst one for the cities is going to be a year after that, because the states are going to make corrections in what they do for cities or how they share revenues with cities. So forecasts, we're going to all have to be aware that forecasts about revenue are going to be a lot more suspect and potentially volatile over the next couple of years until we see something go back to normal. And I think you're going to have to see Fed funds get back up to a reasonable rate. Fed funds at 25 basis points, we really don't know what's going on out there in terms of what banks are doing, and it's just very difficult for us to put something together that is dependable, that we would ask you to rely on in making your decisions.
But we're going to have some numbers, though, because we've got to put our budget together.
We can fix you up with numbers. We've got lots of numbers. We just don't know how reliable they are.
Well, I mean, but you know,
2012, and after that, we'll know.
Well, but what I'm saying is, though, we've got to have some numbers to base what we're planning to do on, good or bad.
So as far as y'all doing multi-year budgets for,
just a tough time for that.
this would be a tough time, and I can see it for planning, maybe equipment needs and things like that, but as far as forecasted revenue,
Well, the one thing that it will do, and I think you saw that in talking to both departments tonight, is where they have capital replacement needs. You know, they have spiked the budgets. The capital budget, when we allowed that to be put in capital, no matter how small the item was, and now in the operating budget, where you've got capital under 10,000 or under 25,000. It bounces around. One of the things the multi-year budgeting does is it makes them think ahead and go ahead and plug those numbers in, because if you've got 2 garbage trucks instead of 1 that you've got to replace next year, then that's going to be a big swing in your budget, and you've got to start thinking ahead and forecasting for that. So I think it will help you as you look at the revenues. The revenues are going to grow more steadily and more reliably than the way expenses bounce around. And one of the things we've tried to do through the fuel hedging and through some of the leasing and some of the other things that we're doing, through the retainer with PFM, is to try to predetermine what those fixed costs are. We know more of the knowns, if you will. The unknowns we can't help you with, but what we'd like to do is pin down what we can so that the volatility doesn't affect our numbers quite as badly.
Good.
But we've also got to live within the revenues that come in. That is also. Well, any other? So are we ready to adjourn?
Second.